So today's webinar focuses on the challenges and opportunities our nations face as we move towards vehicles powered by alternative fuels. Through the presentation, speakers will highlight some of the innovative programs that are leading the way in preparing today's students for a wide range of career pathways associated with electric vehicles. We are pleased to have with us several champions in the field, Charlie Garlow and Erik Nakamura from Washington, D.C.'s Electric Vehicle Grand Prix, Simon Hager, who's the co-founder and current principal at the Workshop School in Philadelphia and leader of the EVX team, and Erik Pageant, the assistant principal of career and technical education at the Garden Grove Unified School District in Garden Grove, California. They will be sharing with you the programs that they help develop and lead to inspire and foster the creativity of their students and to spur innovation in the field of alternatively fueled vehicles. We hope that the programs they share will provide ideas for your own activities. A few housekeeping things before we begin. Andrea mentioned the question box. Make sure you enter any questions you have throughout the webinar into that box so we can address them at the end. Also, if you're having an audio or video problem, please notify us in the chat box and we'll work to help you resolve that. Please note that the webinar is being recorded and it will be posted on the NETWC website. You'll be able to download the presentations from each speaker after the webinar is complete, and our NETWC white paper on the alternative fuel workforce is available for download from your panel under File at any time during this webinar. At the end of the 3 presentations, we will have all the speakers online to answer any questions you may have. Our first presentation is from Charlie Garlow and Erik Nakamura, who organize and run the Washington, D.C. Electric Vehicle Grand Prix for high school students in D.C., Maryland, and Virginia for its 4th year running. Mr. Garlow is an air enforcement attorney and co-owner of an electric bike shop. His interest in science, engineering, electric vehicles, and solar energy, and passion for educating youth led him to run the annual Junior Solar Sprints race in greater Washington, D.C. area. The Junior Solar Sprint is a middle school learning experience in which the students build and race their own miniature model solar cars. Charlie owns and drives electric cars, most recently a 1974 Porsche Model 914 convertible with solar panels on the front and back decks, converted to all electric from gasoline. Mr. Nakamura graduated from the George Washington University with a bachelor's in mechanical engineering and a master's in transportation and safety. He has over 25 years of experience in alternative energy vehicle industry, encompassing basic design to product development, marketing, operations, and strategic planning. He is currently the president of NewGen Mobility that designs and manufactures advanced electric car drive systems for the alternative vehicle industry. He's also part of the advisory board of Global EEE, that is a nonprofit organization whose focus is promoting 3 E's, education, efficiency, and environment. So I will go ahead and now hand it off to our first speaker, Erik Nakamura.
Abby, thank you. I guess you can hear me across the board here?
Yep, we can hear you.
See. All right, there we go. Okay, today in my presentation, I'm pretty much going to give an overview about Global EEE and some of the activities that we do along with the drivers as to why. And then I'm going to discuss a little bit in greater detail one specific program that we have been conducting for, this will be the 5th year moving forward, called the DC Electric Vehicle Grand Prix. As mentioned, Global EEE is a nonprofit organization based out of Washington, D.C. The 3 E's in our organization's name stand for education, energy, and environmental awareness. The organization is primarily manned and supported by volunteers from industries such as myself, academia, and the general public, all of whom have the same ideals and goals. As an organization, we have been involved in STEM-related activities and competitions for over 25 years on an international level. Our mission is to create interest and enthusiasm within STEM-related fields, thereby creating not only better engineers for the future, but also greater awareness for those that may go into alternative professions. This way, we will have a complete circle of able-bodied in the future.
You guys are getting compensated well.
Why is this kind of important, right? Educational institutions throughout the world are reinventing their approach to educating students in order to keep up with the rapidly changing global conditions. Science, technology, engineering, and mathematics are becoming more important than ever with today's technology-driven economies. Emphasis on the shift in energy sources and increasing demand for energy efficiency, coupled with the urgency to address the environmental decline, is requiring a shift in education so we can prepare the next generation for the emerging energy economy coming to pass. The success of nations over the next 30 years will depend not only on the availability of renewable energy resources, but to a greater extent on its industries and a well-prepared generation of professionals and leaders. These professionals are not only engineers, though. It also includes teachers, economists, lawyers, government, and business leaders. They all must develop a good understanding of technology and advancements in renewable energy. So what's required to do this, right? Critical thinking and innovation will become a prerequisite for future competitiveness. Adequately preparing the future generation for these changing trends cannot be accomplished by the education sector alone. Government must create national strategies and programs. Corporations must create stronger ties with academia to catalyze the infusion of latest technologies and trends. And universities should take a leadership role in supporting K-12 educators. To infuse critical thinking and innovation into the education process, students also must be challenged. Today, we often hear and refer to this concept as STEM education. Most often, one perceives this purely as getting the next generation interested or knowledgeable in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. You know, the acronyms of STEM. This is a slight misconception and oversight, mixing up the goal versus the methodology. STEM education is an education methodology based on the idea of educating students in a multidisciplinary and applied approach. STEM education integrates all four disciplines into a cohesive learning paradigm based on real-world applications. As such, hands-on projects have become the norm. Global's methodology and programs falls very much in line with STEM education concept with an additional factor, competition. Global's premise is to create opportunities for students to work on hands-on projects that not only cover the core of STEM education, of having a multidisciplinary and applied approach, but it also helps to promote other key factors that we believe are critical for the future, such as teamwork and working with others in an organized manner, cross-pollination of non-technical aspects by incorporating opportunities and facets for liberal arts or business-type subject matter. The goal is to have awareness across many disciplines. Then we have the competition factor. By organizing these projects as a larger competition, it encourages and allows them to compete against some of the best in the world within their peer group. We also believe that it creates additional drive and interest, facilitating learning and awareness without the students really realizing it, because they're having fun doing it, in short. The primary projects and competitions that Global is involved with are based on alternative energy vehicles, EVs, HEVs, and solar. There are several reasons for the focus on alternative energy vehicles. The primary reason is that EVs, alternative vehicles, are no longer something to be regarded for in the future. They exist in the market today. By having the EV competitions, it provides direct hands-on experience and knowledge to the students, increasing direct awareness in the next generation, who will soon be the primary customers and leaders. Additionally, it provides a cursory entrance of developing the technical skills specific to and required by this new industry. At the same time, overall awareness is created with regards to efficiency and environmental considerations that are critical today and in the future. In order to make this happen, we have to start early. In this context, Global really has four main types of competition spanning across the age groups. The first, the Solar RC, targeted primarily at the middle schools. Here, the students build remote-controlled solar cars and compete against each other. Then there's the Electric Vehicle Grand Prix, primarily targeted at the high school levels. Under this program, the students in a team format build and race fully functional EVs against competing schools. The Hybrid Electric Vehicle Grand Prix, primarily targeted at colleges and universities. This is similar to the Electric Vehicle Grand Prix, but adds an additional layer of complexity by making the vehicle a hybrid. And then there's solar car competitions. This is where cutting edge of technologies come together in real-world application. Full-size electric vehicles that operate 100% off of solar energy are constructed in a race across Australia, the Outback, Japan. There are numerous races that exist today within this. As mentioned, Global has helped organize these type of student competitions around the world that promote the 3 E's. One of particular note that I would like to provide some greater details is the DC Electric Vehicle Grand Prix. The Electric Vehicle Grand Prix is a program targeting towards high school students where they build a fully functional electric vehicle in order to compete against their peers in a race-like atmosphere. The competition's objective is not who can travel the fastest as much as who can travel the furthest distance within 1 hour. For those that know electric vehicles, and in particular battery technology, this is not the same as a normal race in that typically the fastest team wins. To compete successfully, the teams need to focus on efficiency, reliability, race strategy, vehicle performance factors, energy management, and battery technology.
Brakes work, but the pedal is kind of soft, period. I'll take a look at it tomorrow, period.
The program starts out by participating teams are initially provided a complete starter kit that includes all parts for them to build and assemble an electric vehicle. This allows new teams or schools without a large supporting infrastructure to be able to participate on a competitive level, and more importantly, they are able to complete the task at hand, which is very important when dealing with student programs. Over time, as a team starts to gain experience, they begin to expand their program and begin to modify various components, such as designing their own chassis, as we have started to see with some of the teams. It is typically recommended to have at least 2 to 3 months minimum to allow proper assembly of the car. We suggest longer, as much as possible. During this period, Global EEE will provide mentorship to the teams. This includes anything from assisting in the assembly of the car, explanation about how an EV and its components functions, tutorials on batteries, to teaching of simple skills such as crimping or proper use of all-purpose tools. Through the course, what we found based off of feedback from teachers is that over the years, they have expressed that they like the way the program challenges and excites the students at the same time. They concur that being a competition helps to motivate the students beyond normal projects that they work on. And in particular, they actually like when there's a problem. The typical result is that the students have to think out of the box and on their feet, which is a critical part for the future. As a side note, we have also been told that they like the aspect that the program also entails more than just the hard sciences. It also creates an atmosphere to build soft skills such as teamwork, team management. It can involve even those students that are not directly motivated by technology. As an example, you can pull in art students to help design the body painting scheme, or multimedia, or things along those lines, because we do offer awards for best photos, best videos. So it's trying to get multidisciplines beyond just the hard sciences. In summary, the DC Electric Vehicle Grand Prix is an annual event, and we are now in its 5th year of operation. Currently, there are 24 different high schools from DC, Maryland, Virginia, and Ohio that participate in this competition. As previously mentioned, the response from the students, teachers, and sponsors have been very positive. So much that we have started to look at expanding the program to other locations. The sites that are being considered or are in process in the short term are in Ohio, Baltimore, Maryland, Kingston, Jamaica, and possibly West Virginia. Here's a short list of the schools that have been participating within things. And one of the biggest things, as with anything, a lot of this cannot happen with various government support and or sponsors. So this is one of the critical things that needs to get moving in order to meet the demand for the future. Charlie, I don't know if you want to go.
Yes, this is Charlie Garlow. Thank you, Eric. That was an excellent presentation. I'm pleased and honored to be associated with the EV Grand Prix here in the greater Washington, D.C. area where I live and work. I think I'm mostly on this program because for the last 26 years, I've been working with the Junior Solar Sprint Championships that the Electric Vehicle Association of Greater Washington, D.C. has been sponsoring. We're glad to help co-sponsor the DC Electric Vehicle Grand Prix for high school students as well, but our focus has really been on the middle school kids, scholars, if you will, to build their small shoebox-sized solar race cars. Safety is not a factor in these because they're smaller and simpler and nobody gets their fingers burned or electrocuted. It's merely a matter of hooking up a solar panel. It's about as big as the roof on the top on your shoebox to the vehicle, which the students would construct out of either balsa wood or a plastic milk jug or whatever sort of material they want to use to figure out how to get wheels, axles, bearings to let the axle flow smoothly together in a package that you've got a platform that will roll down the 60-foot, 20-meter racetrack that we have. It's just a drag strip race straight ahead, so it's not too complicated. We have a fishing wire string that goes from one end to the other of the racetrack so that the vehicle can be able to be attached to the belly of the vehicle and it will go straight rather than veering off to the left or the right. There's no remote control, there's no steering involved here at all. It's merely a matter of the students lining up their four vehicles probably in a heat, covering up their solar panels with a magazine or a piece of cardboard or something, and I say ready, set, go. They pull off their covering, the sunshine hits their solar panels, electricity is generated and goes directly to the motor, and they take off like a bat out of hell. It's great fun. The kids get all excited about this. They jump up and down. My science teachers who bring their teams to the races say they don't often get their students to jump up and down and get excited about science this way. So I'm thrilled to be participating in helping students get that kind of enthusiasm aimed at the STEM learning that they're engaged in, to learn about gear ratios and low rolling resistance tires and aerodynamic streamlining and other engineering and science concepts. As our most recent election has suggested, enthusiasm is vital and often can make the difference in bringing in a winning team. So we have been doing that for 26 years, nothing new for us. The Junior Solar Sprint races we try to use as an educational opportunity to talk about other things that these middle school students can do, that they can move up when they go into high school into the DC Electric Vehicle Grand Prix or the college level excitement that Erik has mentioned. The solar car races are going across the outback of Australia. I think one of the things that Erik may not have mentioned was that our DC EV Grand Prix winners were sent out to California not too long ago. Those are the high school kids, and they did terrifically. They beat the pants off lots of other California area students, and so we thought that was a real feather in our cap for the East Coast teams. And you know, California is sort of the home of lots of electric vehicles, lots of solar energy developments. Everybody sort of looks to California as being #1, but we showed them that we were better than, at least in that contest. So we try to suggest that there is a stepping ladder to not only be excited about your little shoebox-sized solar car now, but that this is leading to a career pathway, if you will, in the future, so that they will be able to help power our transportation, power our industry, power our homes with the electric vehicle technologies, the battery technologies that can be used to supply homes. I mean, I bring along my Porsche, my 19 Porsche to show them, which is more of a hands-on sort of electric vehicle than the ones that you can buy at your Chevy or other dealerships, your Tesla dealerships, in that most modern American or foreign or whatever level, most modern electric vehicles have all the electronics hidden underneath of the vehicle or someplace where it's away from human contact, because they don't want anybody sticking their fingers into high voltage areas. Makes perfect sense. But in the case of my Porsche, it's been hand built. Everything is open and visible so that the students or adults who are looking can see all the different parts, can figure out here we've got the batteries, here we've got the control technologies, the power flows through these thicker cables. You can see how everything works, and it's also encased under plexiglass so that you're not sticking your finger on the battery terminals. We try not to have anybody put their tongue on the terminals. So that and other vehicles will be brought along to the Junior Solar Sprint races so that the students can see what other possibilities are out there for them. And we talk about the possibilities of powering our homes with our electric vehicles. To run a cord from your car from your house to your car to charge it up is one thing, but to run a cord from your car into the house when there's a blackout in the neighborhood is another trick which not too many people know about. But we're glad to demonstrate that for students by having an inverter sitting on top of the battery on my Porsche and show them how that can run a hair dryer or a coffee maker or anything else that would normally run on 120 volts. So it's an eye-opener, I think, for a lot of the students and the adults who come along to chaperone and observe the races. But we hope that it's going to be a part of getting these students started into a STEM-related program of learning, even if they don't become electric vehicle mechanics or electric vehicle engineers, if they're going to be involved in some sort of exciting career in the future that involves the technologies that we don't even really know about yet. That'll be good because they will have had a firm grounding in STEM technology to get excited about it and to be enthusiastic about this technology, and especially about the environmental benefits that can flow from these sorts of early adoption, early efforts in their education. I think that should do it for me. Back to you, Em.
Okay, thank you, Charlie, and thank you, Erik, for speaking. It's really interesting to hear about these different programs, especially when they offer such different scales of working with electric vehicles and engaging many different grade levels. It's also exciting to hear about different ways you all are reaching out to students outside of the hard sciences to get them interested and engaged in electric vehicles. Okay, so our next presenter is Simon Hager, the co-founder and current principal at the Workshop Philadelphia. Simon is an engineer turned high school math and science teacher and more recently principal. He began the Hybrid X team at West Philadelphia High School 15 years ago to engage his students in math, science, and engineering. The students in the after-school program have won multiple national competitions with the hybrid vehicles they designed and built. Their vehicles have outperformed top universities and corporations. In 2010 and 2014, Simon's students were honored at the White House. The innovative approach to education that powered the Hybrid X team to success is the basis for a new school that Simon and his colleagues have begun. The Workshop School challenges students to solve the world's most pressing problems and organizes teaching and learning in service to do so. Thank you for being here today, Simon.
Thank you for having me. So I'm going to just tell you a little bit about my story and how I kind of accidentally fell into this about 17 years ago, and through that process, maybe that's informative for your teaching practice and how you might think about integrating some of this into your own classroom or schools. So I started with an after-school program. I teach in Philadelphia, or I taught in Philadelphia. My slide is not, there we go. And let me see, there we go. And I started it pretty simple. I started with a science fair project, and we happened to have a go-kart frame laying around, and some students were interested in comparing gas-powered to electric-powered vehicles way back in 1998. And my kids ended up doing exceptionally well at the science fair with this project, and it was our very first electric vehicle. So I started the program just to engage kids in interesting work, and the easiest place to do that was in this after-school space for me, in the kind of circumstances I was working in. I didn't really think they would win. I worked at a kind of neighborhood high school. It's not known for students winning science fairs, and so this kind of encouraged the kids and myself to dream bigger. The shop had a, sorry, having some technical difficulties, there we go. The shop had a Jeep Wrangler that had been donated to the vocational program at the school, and they weren't really doing much with it, so the kids decided they wanted to do a full-size electric vehicle the following year and enter it in the science fair and do a comparison around what they could do with the fuel economy equivalent by converting a Jeep Wrangler, which is not the most aerodynamic or lightweight vehicle. It's not really the ideal electric vehicle, but it was a fun project, and it helped them learn more about electric vehicles on a full-size scale, and they got to see firsthand how much efficiency they could gain from converting straight to an electric vehicle. They ended up winning the local science fair in Philadelphia, which was a first for the high school that I taught at, and they went on to the States and did really well at the States. And again, this experience motivated them and got more students attracted to the after-school program. And so the following year, they converted. We got Saturn, a local Saturn dealership that donated a Saturn, and they converted to electric power. And this was in 2000. And at that time, there was a competition in the Northeast called the Tour de Sol. It was a 5-day road rally for alternative fuel vehicles that typically ran from Washington, D.C. to New York. Sometimes it ran in upstate New York. And so this vehicle was entered in that competition, and it was the first time they had a team of color, which was kind of exciting to represent the urban high school population. And it was an amazing learning experience for the students. Not only did they enter the Tour de Sol, but they also made a variety of science fair projects related to the vehicle. And one of the big ones was, how can we improve the aerodynamics? Right outside of Philadelphia is a full-size wind tunnel that does a lot of helicopter testing, and so we reached out to the engineers there, and the kids did this science fair project on aerodynamics and did scale models, and then compared it to the aerodynamic improvements that they did on this vehicle. So a great learning experience, again, all in the after-school space. That led us to 2002. We turned to the Tour de Sol, kept working on the vehicle. You can kind of see it in the background. We painted it orange, and at that point, we're getting 180 miles per gallon equivalent. And so the students kind of refined what they learned and continue to grow in their knowledge. And it just became a powerful learning experience in this after-school space. The other interesting thing that happened at the 2002 Tour de Sol was that Honda and Toyota were using that event to do some test marketing around their brand new hybrid vehicles. And so my students got a first-hand experience with these vehicles, and really believed hybrid technology was the next thing. It was kind of interesting in retrospect. My students were not the demographic that the Insight and Prius were made for or marketed to, but my kids had the foresight to realize that this was the next technology back in 2002. And so they thought something was lacking. They thought that if hybrids were going to catch on, they needed to be cooler. And of course, that's kind of a teenage mindset. And so I challenged them to solve that problem. And so we put together a summer program and worked to really grapple with that. What would a cool hybrid look like and behave like? And they came up with this wild idea that they should build the world's first badass hybrid. Badass and hybrid don't usually go in the same sentence. At least back then, that was very novel. And so we raised some money, and over the course of the next 2 years, they developed this vehicle, which was a hybrid sports car. We took it back to the Tour de Sol in 2005 and won the race again that year. And then they painted it because that was kind of customary at this point. And we took it back again and won the race the following year. And so as an educator, what was happening to me was I was getting exposed to this really creative after-school space that empowered students, made them the experts, got them to be outside the school walls and presenting their work and taking it and showing it off not only in the competition, but we would get invited to all sorts of events. And that experience really transformed my understanding of what good teaching and learning looks like. For many students, they need that kind of experience and need to be held accountable for real-world standards. A lot of what goes on in schools is pretty artificial, and they're being held to somebody's standard, but so much of education has been dissected, and it doesn't connect with kids. And so as a teacher, I was looking for more and more opportunities to have a more integrated, more real-world based schooling options for students. And so these kind of two parallel tracks. The after-school program was growing in notoriety, and we were having a lot of fun and success working with students in this space. And as a teacher, I was becoming more and more frustrated with kind of the limits of what I could do during the school day. And so I started working with friends to try to start a school. And around the same time, the X Prize announced a $10 million competition for cars that could go into production or pre-production and get over 100 miles per gallon. That was the goal for the X Prize. And that was announced back in 2007. And it was really set up for businesses, not for high schools or colleges or universities. And as we looked through the rules further and further, the kids got more and more excited about what they wanted to compete. And so, you know, I challenged them to, well, we have to figure out how to address the rules of this particular competition. And they reached out to one of the local universities who helped develop a business plan based on a couple of their ideas, and we took care of the cars. And they developed two vehicles. One was a conversion of a Ford Taurus, and at this time the U.S. automotive industry was kind of imploding, and they wanted to not only build a car that could get over 100 miles a gallon and be affordable, but they wanted to use all American-made technology. And so that was a really interesting kind of design constraint that they put on themselves. And so for this vehicle, to make it a hybrid, we used American-made lithium batteries. We used out of Allentown, PA. We used an American-made electric drive system. And for a small gas engine to power to assist, there wasn't a lot of choices, and so we ended up with a Harley-Davidson 2-cylinder gas engine as the hybrid drive, and it was quite an interesting project. You could tell when it was in electric mode, and you could definitely tell when it was not in electric mode, and so the kids were really proud of this. They developed a second vehicle. The hybrid sports car had become part of our image, and so they built a new one based on Factory 5 GTM, again American-made technology, and this one had a 4-cylinder diesel engine, and the electric motor was more of a supplement in this vehicle instead of the primary drive. And so, and they were put on an international venue to show off their work, and it was like I said earlier, it was an amazing learning experience for them, and it showed what students can do when they're given the opportunity. We did not end up winning the competition. We did extremely well. There's a documentary called Fast Times at West Philly High. If you're having trouble sleeping one night, Frontline did it. They followed us through the competition, and it proved to be, I think, objectively, I can say, a really well-done documentary. The kind of overarching thing that came out of this, as I said, there's these parallel tracks. As an educator, I started to really question my ability to provide an effective education to my students during the school day when I saw the amazing work they were doing after school. And one of my students and I got invited to present at a large conference, and during the presentation, my student said this: you can't teach critical thinking skills without critical conditions. And that really kind of defined some of the work that would follow. So we wanted to set up a school where kids were engaged and solving real problems, if it was working on cars or working on green roofs or learning to use old school tools like chop saws, or writing speeches, and that's the former mayor of Philadelphia in the background, and delivering them. We wanted to create a school that really engaged students and honored them, and respected the different skills that they had, and gave them real problems and real challenges to solve, and the ability to create things that really mattered, like the vehicles that they got to work on. And so in 2011, we launched a pilot program which would eventually turn into a new public school in Philadelphia called the Workshop School. We're in our 4th year as a full public high school in Philly. It's a small school, but it's a project-based school, and while we still do car projects because that's in our DNA, there's a lot of other amazing projects that students do that show the ability that they have, but also really develop the skills that we think are necessary to compete in the world. So that's my slideshow, and I look forward to further conversation and answering questions at the end of these presentations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Simon. It's really interesting and impressive to see the number of different vehicles that went under conversion and just how innovative these kids were with your program. We'll also have to check out that documentary. Was it called Fast Times at West Philadelphia High?
Yeah, if you Google Fast Times at West Philly High, it's on a PBS Frontline its website. And it's 40 minutes. If you're having a hard time sleeping, you can check it out one night. I think it's pretty good.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, our last speaker today is Erik Pageant. He's the Assistant Principal of Career and Technical Education at the Garden Grove Unified School District. Along with traveling to and visiting a variety of schools and programs around the country, he has lobbied for numerous educational policies and legislation, both in Sacramento and Washington, D.C. Additionally, for the past 8 years, he has served as a trustee on the Placentia Yorba Linda Unified School Board of Education. You can tell I'm not from California, sorry about that. A school district that has many CTE pathway programs. Erik will be discussing the switch vehicle kits Garden Grove has utilized for students to build and deconstruct special electric vehicles. Thanks for joining us, Erik.
Hey, good afternoon. How's everybody doing? So here's where we're at. We kind of are at the infancy of the program. I kind of feel way behind everybody else that's spoken, but better to start now than never. So what we've done over the past couple of years, myself and the director of CTE here in Garden Grove, and working with 2 other very large districts. So we represent about 125,000 students right here in the heart of Orange County. We have taken our engineering and automotive programs kind of to the next level. During some conversations with the Board of Education where I'm employed, we decided to move forward with switch lab vehicles. And these are basically just a very simple electric vehicle that you can see. The technology is very simple, and as a matter of fact, the whole vehicle comes in as a kit, and the students put this kit together, which I'll talk about here a little bit more. But the whole front end is based on a Volkswagen. It comes in with a welded frame. The students can work on the frame. Simple technology, great way to start. The Switch Lab vehicle Incorporated is located up in Sebastopol since 2011 when they really started up there, and the 2 main founders are Peter Oliver, who was a former adjunct faculty from Santa Rosa Junior College, and he founded a large IT company in 1985 to 2005 for that 20-year period. And James McGreen, who is a former motorcycle racer, manufacturer of ultralight aircraft parts, Electrothon Racing, and a ZAP, which is zero air pollution, which he invented ZAPPy. Look that thing up. It's a little 3-wheel vehicle that is pretty unique. So the Switch Lab vehicles they're fun, affordable, useful electric vehicles that enhance our district STEM programs that we already have going. In our automotive programs, we use the CDX Tech program, which is an online hands-on as well mixed technology, and then for our engineering programs, we're pretty much project lead the way across the district for a multitude of reasons. But these hands-on PBLs take the kids through the chassis, the suspension, the brakes, the steering. The electrical part is the motor, speed control, batteries, charging, lights, and instrumentation. And just the engineering efficiency and coefficients of drag. I know that it was spoken about other competitions on the East Coast, and we have our own little competition out here with University of California, Irvine. It's the UCI Performance Engineering Project, and this started with Professor McCarthy just a handful of years ago, and it started off with colleges, and then they invited high school programs to come in and participate. And for the most part up to this point, it's been mostly gas or propane-powered motors. There, from the colleges, have been some solar vehicles that have come in and some hybrid vehicles. And so we're hoping to take this to the next step by introducing the switch vehicle. What's really great for our program is the Switch Lab provides, when you purchase, a hands-on training for the teachers through a 5-day workshop where they actually build the actual EV vehicle. The program comes complete with curriculum, lesson plans, lab projects, and it allows the teachers to build this vehicle in their class with the students. A couple comments I put on here. I talked to some of my teachers who are very, very excited. I put 5 teachers through the training this last summer. One instructor says, "This is just an amazing opportunity for my students." He was very, very impressed with going through the training, and the kids are very excited in the classroom. He's at Los Amigos High School, part of our district. And another instructor, Bill Bouvier, quoted saying, "Bringing the EV technology to my students' engineering program allows them to experience today's technology firsthand." Couple pictures I put up here of the students in action. It just comes in as a basic welded up frame, and they take it from that. The schools have been at that point painting it up to their school colors. It might be simplistic, some of the things we've seen earlier, but this is kind of our starting point and building point. Some of the challenges that we've faced in our district and the other 2 that I work with were program awareness, educating and getting permission from the school board to move forth and spend funds that come to the district, whether they're funds from the state or through Perkins Grant. The funding for this, you've got to figure that out ahead of time. Another big area that we face is just unfamiliar subject for my instructors. What's their capacity? What's their background in EV technology, which has been very limited up to this point. They understand automotive electronics, engineering electronics, but not the EV technology. Facility site working space. Do we have the current site facility in the space? And we made that happen at the schools where we put it. The other part was, what do the students need for academic preparedness? Just as any program starts, it's new. And as a program builds, you have those students that return, for year 2 or year 3 of the program, and they bring a lot back into the classroom. And then the other issue that we are looking at and facing and working on is, using the vehicle for multiple classes. The way it's set up, so we're looking at these vehicles to be used for the 2nd or 3rd level of a program, not just for the entry-level student. Even though the technology can be used there, we can't afford to have 3 and 4 of those vehicles in the classroom. And then, Switch Lab came up, heard some of this stuff, and they've found, raising funds through partnering with Sonoma Clean Power Company in Santa Rosa, and then also partnering out here in California with a CTE Foundation. So there's different ways to solve the financial issue if that's the case. But also out here in California right now, we have we're in our 1st year of what the governor put out as a Cte Incentive Grant, which allowed districts to apply. It's a competitive grant, but there's a considerable amount of money for each district that applied, and we're using some of those funds for this program as well. And then basically the Switch Lab, if anybody's interested in it, it's just STEM-based curriculum. It's PBL, project-based learning. They help innovation with the students and the instructors, and they're up in Sebastian Pool, California. So the way that my teachers have been very, very impressed with it, it's kind of that intro year, trying to move forward with EV technology. And with that, I'll just kind of pass it back to you.
Great. I want to thank all 3 presenters for a wonderful set of presentations highlighting a diversity of EV educational programs. Please remember to enter any remaining questions you have in the question box. I'll now turn it over to Andrea Zimmerman, who will handle the Q&A portion of this presentation.
Thanks so much, Abby, and thank you to all of the presenters for the time that you took out of your day to share your stories and the just really interesting, innovative work that you're doing. So we have gotten a lot of questions, but actually before I jump in, which also will give folks who might have some lingering questions some time to jump in with some additional ones. But, you know, as I was sitting here listening to Simon and Erik and Charlie, you know, all talking about what they're doing, it occurred to me as I'm sitting here thinking about myself as a CTE advocate and, you know, the schools and the community colleges and the different folks that we work with out there. But, you know, something that I heard Simon talking about where he said about reinventing, you know, that old vocational education laboratory that wasn't really being used, and then, you know, really was able to sort of give it not only new life with, you know, but also maybe a new purpose that, you know, was sort of harnessing this new electric vehicle, but then also, electric vehicle sort of industry that was emerging, but then also about engaging, you know, students and giving them kind of showing them the power of applied learning and what they're, you know, here to do and why they're here to do it. And then also hearing about sort of the leveraging of employer partnerships of a local car dealership that donated a car that could be converted, and, you know, engineers at the local wind or nearby wind tunnel that he talked about, that I think are sort of all those kind of key leverage points that are important when you're looking at this from maybe wherever you may be coming from, if you're an employer or if you know, you're a local educator or an administrator. And when Erik in California was talking and really hit on something I think is really important too, is about the power of meaningful professional development, of giving concrete examples and exposing teachers to what these industries look like, giving them concrete examples they can then take and use in their classroom. And in fact, we've gotten a couple questions sort of to that end. And so let me jump in. I'm also looking to see if there's any other questions that have come up as we talk. So the first one I actually want to throw back to, let's see here, sorry about that, I'm scrolling through all my questions, to Charlie, actually, you know, kind of coming from the sort of employer space here. But someone had asked if you sort of have any resources that you know, could share. You know, it's again that idea of, I think, educators looking for really concrete examples, but it has any resources you can share concerning conversion of your Porsche, some of those things that you use with the, you know, with the students that you work with, et cetera. Is there a place where you could point to? Is that online or anything you could share?
Sure. This is Charlie Garlow again. There are a number of electric vehicle chapters around the United States. The Electric Vehicle Association of Greater Washington, D.C. is one of only 80-some different chapters that are part of the Electric Auto Association. So if you go there, you might be able to find a chapter that's close to you, and go to one of those chapters and talk to people and, you know, shake hands. That's hands-on science right there, and find out what resources they may have locally. The way I did my Porsche conversion was to find an old Porsche. The gas engine was about shot, and we ripped out the gas guts, and we thought, how do we put the electric guts in there? And then we've looked at some of the available companies that will sell you a kit. The Porsche is or Volkswagens, particularly used conversion vehicles because they're small, relatively lightweight, not too complex, I guess, so that would be good. There are a lot of resources to help with that on the EAA, or Electric Auto Association, website for conversions. There are conversion kit companies that will sell you a kit, but a lot of times it may not fit with your vehicle. There's sometimes, you know, marrying up what you have to what they have an adapter plate of some kind or other, so it's not that easy. On the Junior Solar Sprint races, it's a relatively inexpensive proposition to build yourself a Solar Sprint race car, about $50 probably. You can get those from pitsco.com, which is out of Pittsburgh, Kansas. There's a Pittsburgh in Kansas, believe it or not. They're one of the big science providers of these sorts of kits. The Department of Energy has a website. You can go to the DOE website and Google or search engine for the Junior Solar Sprint. Out of Golden, Colorado, they have a number of educational pamphlets, brochures to help the teachers get started in their classrooms with using the teaching module of the Junior Solar Sprint. How do you go about building these? What are some of the science principles that will be involved? And And then again, there are probably people like me who are volunteers who will volunteer to come around to a middle school or junior high school and give a razzle-dazzle blitzkrieg tour through how to build your own electric vehicle or your own solar sprint race car. Now, I know that there are a lot of teachers maybe across the United States who already feel pressure to teach to the test, and you only have so many hours in the day and you can't get around to doing this, and that is a challenge. It's also a challenge in that there are a limited number of people like me who are volunteers. But if you are looking around for someone, you might think of trying to recruit people like retired people. I'm a retired person myself, who have spare time on their hands to read some of these materials. You don't have to be an electrical engineer to run a junior solar sprint race. Anybody can do it. I'm not an engineer. I'm just a lawyer. What do I know? Nothing. But we have a lot of fun. We have a lot of learning. We have some trophies to win for our kids. We invite the media in to take pictures of our kids and get their face in the newspapers or the local TVs. That's always good to pump them up again for next year. So let me stop right there and see if that answered your question.
It does, and along with that Frontline documentary link that I know they've already shared out through the chat box, but I think that one of the things folks can know is that in the sort of follow-up email that will come after this webinar, we'll make sure that some of these links that Charlie just rattled off and some other ones that have come up throughout the webinar are sort of in that email for you, so then you'll be able to access it at any time. So similarly to Erik Nakamura, a question came across, kind of a technical one, but how much time does the middle school solar car program take, and was it offered as an elective or an after-school program? How was it delivered?
Well, I'm going to respond in a little bit two different ways. Just the solar car sprint program, like similar to what Charlie was speaking about, that doesn't take a lot of time, and the biggest thing is really depends upon the teachers. Sometimes they do it as clubs as an after-school, or they integrate it within their class, because you're dealing with normally one kid you have one or two students working with, and it's fairly simplistic construction within that. As you said, it's about a shoebox size type scenario, so that normally could be done within a couple hours as long as they understand what they want to do. The biggest problem with a lot of this stuff is deciding how they want to put it together, what type of gear ratios do they choose, and how much they actually do testing. Just in case, if we're referring to the Electric Vehicle Grand Prix as far as the stuff which is more targeted for the high school students, if they have the proper tool set and the way that the kits are normally organized, where you only need basic wrenches, drills, and a saw, technically speaking, if you've done it before, it could probably take about 15 hours of direct assembly. But normally what we recommend is about 2 to 3 months, because often the schools will organize it as an after-school activity or club. So they'll come in, meet twice a week for 2 to 3 hours each session. And during that course, they're all getting together, planning out how they're going to do it. And, it's not necessarily, let's face it, the most direct productive time, in the sense that if you've done this before, you can put it together very quickly. But having all the students interact with each other and everything else, that's why we say typically over a 2 to 3 month period is what they should allocate.
Great. Thank you. And we kind of got two similar questions to Simon and to Erik in California. Complicated. We have two Eriks on the line here, but also to Erik in California, there was a question about the Project Lead the Way courses that you mentioned, and how did you integrate the switch and hands-on labs into your current curriculum? Like, for example, did you use a capstone style course, or was it something sort of separate from that? And also, was it cross-disciplinary in terms of, did it hit multiple content areas?
Good question. That varies school by school. We have the Switch Lab at 4 of our 8 high schools. With the PLTW, the first course is, the Intro to Engineering Design, the IED, and the second one is the POE, which is the Principles of Engineering. The carts on those classes are being used more in the POE, and a lot of them, honestly, I think are best, as other speakers have said. With a smaller group, a lot of times after school, they kind of do it as a, quote, competition group for the UCI Energy Invitational. It's available during the class to use it as a teaching tool, but it works best in a smaller group setting. So we've incorporated in that with the engineering. With our automotive classes, they've done it for the level 2, level 3 students that are coming back. That fits right into the curriculum. They've already gone through the base curriculum, and then it fits into a deeper understanding of whether it's EV or if it's solar or if they're going to some type of natural gas. But that's how it's gone. Every instructor's been doing it a little bit different, and we've been trying to work with them to have it fit into their comfort level. And I think that's kind of what's key. Again, I'm kind of bringing this technology into them. They were not hesitant in the least. They were all extremely excited that we were doing this. It's just for them to get their comfort level. And we're kind of looking at this as a base year, a learning year, and they're doing a lot of collaboration and moving forward from that point.
Great. And to Simon, as you described kind of the evolution of the work you were doing and then how you transitioned into this full-time school, the workshop school, you came into education from a little bit of a different angle. So how is it that you approached blending, the high school learning with sort of hands-on learning? This is a question that we got, again, from the audience.
Well, there's a lot packed into that question. It depends on what you think is important for students to learn. And so I think over the last 10 years, I've moved farther away from what kind of is traditionally held as important. Obviously, students need to be able to read and do math, but there's a lot of time spent on kind of factoids, learning specific information that we don't really use as adults. And so the kind of blended approach grew out of, like I explained earlier, out of this after-school program where kids got engaged in solving real problems. Before I was a math and science teacher, I was an engineer, and seeing them start to develop real engineering skills, problem-solving skills, and then learning the academic content they needed when it was necessary because it was being driven by something that was real, became part of the model for the school that we started. So a lot of schools use project-based approaches, and so not only do you have this relevance and meaning in the work, but you also have students developing critical thinking skills because they're really thinking critically and asking good questions and owning the problem that they're trying to solve. Problem solving, time management, project management, how to use feedback and give feedback, how to persist and improve. And so the skills that you and I and adults use on a regular basis that make us successful, we're really going after those skills as well. So we're not limiting ourselves to knowing facts about the War of 1812. We're looking at what's a holistic student really need to develop to be successful. And so that's a hard question to answer, but when you think about learning, the question is learning what? And so part of what we're after in this school that we started is to really think deeply about what things are important to learn.
That's great, and this is a question of my own, but to that end, you said you're in your 4th year. So in your mind, how are you measuring success? How do you know that this model that you've created with this school is working?
Yeah, that's a great question. In less than 10,000 words and in less than a half an hour, that's not an easy one to answer. We've done a lot of thinking. The short version of that is we look at traditional metrics. There's standardized tests that the students have to perform on. We look at attendance and behavior and things of that nature and compare to the demographic counterparts at other schools. But we also look at the project work that students are doing, and we look at metrics that are non-traditional. So we have our own version of these non-cognitive skills. Tony Wagner's work, the My Ways projects, the HP deeper learning competencies. There's a lot of interesting work that's come out in the last 5 or so years around these skills that are really important, and we measure and track those skills, and we weight them often just as valuable as the kind of more traditional skills. And so that's the short version of that answer, but there's a lot packed in there.
Absolutely, and thank you. I knew it was a loaded question. Simon, one other question while I have you here, and that is, you showed us a lot of pictures of cars that the students actually built, and they clearly work and they're functional. What happens with those vehicles after the competitions, et cetera?
Yeah, so I mean, we usually use a vehicle in competition for a couple years, and then there's all sorts of shows that they get invited to. And again, the thing that's important for me as an educator is that the students are exhibiting their work in real-world conditions. So if that's a competition or an exhibition or a science fair, that work is moving outside the school walls, and it's being evaluated by outside standards. That puts the students in the position to meet those outside standards, but also they're the experts, and so that's a very empowering place for a student to be, where they have to talk about the work that they've done, and it creates an enormous amount of ownership and pride over the work. So I'm not sure if that answered the question.
Absolutely. Thank you. So,
were they used as commuter cars by somebody at the schools, like the principal or the science teachers?
Were you able to hear that, Erik, or Simon?
No, I'm sorry, I didn't.
Charlie, could you repeat that again?
I'm just wondering if these vehicles are actually used as commuter cars to get students or principals or teachers back and forth to school.
Oh, were they using the cars to kind of go back to and from school, et cetera?
No, we don't. We, for insurance and liability reasons, no, we do not. I ended up financing one project myself in 2006, and the students built a car that I ended up using. And then as I've gotten older, the kind of, the compromises you make when you build your own car versus buying. I drive a Nissan Leaf now. It's nice that the windshield wipers always work and you have heat, and airbags are kind of an interesting thing to have as well. So, so the short answer is no.
All right. So this is actually a question for Abby, because you talked at the top of the webinar about the Clean Cities initiative, and we got a question that says, are there any examples of how Clean Cities coordinators or coalitions have been involved with these type of high school or university projects and programs, and what is the best way for coordinators to support these projects? Abby, are you still there? All right.
Sorry.
Okay.
I was on mute. I'm here. So I would just encourage the person who asked that question to definitely check out our white paper, because a lot of what we put in the white paper on this topic was information taken from Clean Cities coordinators, and any coordinators that said they had specifically done work with electric vehicle technology education in a multitude of grade levels we interviewed. But we found that there's a lot of disconnects, I think, between the work that we as coordinators do on the ground promoting alternative fueled vehicles and these educational programs that are educating the workforce that we work with once they're actually out in the workforce. But the examples that come to mind is we have a couple of coordinators that actually teach. They go and they make arrangements with their local community colleges, and they teach EV education and hybrid technology education. So that's the example that's coming to mind. And in that case, they've actually gone out and got trained themselves and then created partnerships with local CTE programs. But I would say there's a lot of opportunity there for us to get more involved in this arena. And I think a good starting point would be to check out our white paper and then give us comments, and feel free to follow up with me individually on that question.
Great. All right. So I really just have one last question, and it's going to be to sort of each person who's presented today, and I'll probably start from the top. But, this question is kind of about, you've talked a lot about what you're doing, and we've got folks here listening on the phone and probably thinking, so what would it take for me to do this? And you can take this as either a very technical question or something a little more abstract or philosophical. I'll let you decide. But to Erik in DC, can you kind of tackle that first? So if someone's looking at what you've described today, what would be most important for them to kind of think about if they wanted to do this and integrate it into their own programs at their schools?
I'm going to I think the question is asking twofolds. One is obviously when thinking about specifically the projects that we have discussed today, whether ours or the other various discussions. A lot of that is just really reaching out and finding what type of support structure you have first within your school and then within, say, what I call local government potential grants or policies, because unfortunately today you require a lot of permissions within the system, and then there's a financial perspective that depending on the scale of the project. So it's really finding out and reaching out and finding a support system. But when you get down to it, what I think it really comes down to is all of the information that we've discussed today is based on the same premise. It's really finding a concept or a project that the students can work on. It can be something as small down to like the junior solar sprints to larger scale full vehicle conversions or midway, and then think about how to excite the students within that project. And that's why, at least for us, we think based around some form of competition or specific goal creates a lot of motivation within that. There are a lot of different programs that exist out there throughout the country, from small to large. If you do just basic general searches, you'll probably find a lot of things out there, even the various organizations that promote these type of things. And specifically for us, there are similar programs out there, but the easiest thing is that, as mentioned, we're slowly trying to expand this throughout, different regions and locations. Especially, we've been getting a lot of support from DOE. They like what we've been doing. So you can even reach out directly, and we can try to help facilitate or discuss directly for your specific area or school as to what might make the most sense. Hopefully that answers.
It does. Thank you. Charlie, what about you? How would you answer that question?
Well, getting involved in junior solar sprint is relatively...
Sorry, Charlie, we're still having trouble hearing you. Could you try to speak up or make sure the phone's near you?
Can you hear me better now?
That's perfect. Yeah, thank you.
Well, the junior solar sprint is relatively easy. The cost is low, as I mentioned, only about $50 a kit. And if you've got a classroom of kids, you're probably only looking at a couple of $100. Get enough kits to keep all of your kids on teams of 2 or 3 people each. The time involvement is not very much, so finding a science teacher that wants to be a part of the program is probably the first step to take. Looking at some of the videos and the materials that are on the DOE website, there are rock videos to get you pumped up about this program. But once you've decided this is a good learning module, a teaching module, if you can find the time to squeeze it into your curriculum, you can go for it with just a very little about, a couple of people that actually sort of help you run the races in your city or town between the competition between different schools. It's not that tough. It's harder for some of these bigger high school projects. You're paying several $1,000s for a vehicle, or maybe even a couple of tens of thousands of dollars, $20,000 or $30,000 for the Switch Lab kits. So it can be more of an undertaking. Junior Solar Sprint, relatively easy. We ought to be having 50% of the middle schools in this country doing Junior Solar Sprint, if you ask me.
Great, thank you. Simon, how would you answer that question? Simon, are you there? All right, we'll come back. He's possibly on mute. And Erik in California, you coming from your perspective as a administrator in a school, probably you did deal with this question, and you probably have other people who ask you how you did it. So, what would you say is sort of the most important takeaways? If someone says, this is really interesting, I want to do this to, for my own programs?
You know, it comes down to the individual teacher at the school. It's kind of what I call the skill and the will. You know, you got to find somebody that has, one, the will to do it, and two, that they have the skill to do it. I think you can teach the skill, but really it has to be somebody that wants to really put the time in and be dedicated to the program. If you look at your best programs, I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's the core four, if it's, you know, a sports program or if it's an engineering program. The programs that consistently outperform the others are where somebody is really dedicated to that program. And it's having the right people in the right place and making sure that my job is to make sure that they get the support and the training and the tools necessary to be successful with their students. It's really that simple. And I agree. It's just we went with the Switch Lab because it worked for us. My hope is that from that launching point, it will morph and that they will go into some of the other projects that we saw in some of these other presentations here today.
Great. Simon, I wanted to try and come back to you. Are you there? All right. Well, thank you to all the presenters for just a really great conversation that we've had today. I want to pass it back to Abby to close us out.
Okay, thanks so much, Andrea. That was a great conversation and a lot of really great questions. We'll go ahead and end the webinar now, but if anyone has comments or questions to follow, make sure you follow up with us at the Northeast Transportation Workforce Center. Please check our website, netwc.net, for more upcoming webinars. We also invite you to share any of your professional development programs or ideas with our center. Thank you for attending and have a wonderful day.
Abby, I wonder if I could add one last comment before 4:30 our time, which is I would encourage everyone on this webinar to think about owning or leasing and driving an electric vehicle. So wherever you go, you're a teaching module. I take my Porsche over to the grocery store, and I've had many opportunities to pop the hood and start up a conversation about electric vehicles right there in the parking lot at the grocery store, and everybody else can do the same thing.
That's a great point. It's no better way to showcase it than to actually have one and drive it around. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Goodbye.